Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today, and for those of you who have been brave enough to come, notwithstanding the current COVID-19 situation, it's very good to see many of you here today. I wanted to say a few words about the Global Compact on Refugees, and I understand that many of you in the room have a lot of expertise on the Compact, so I won't dwell too much on what's in the Compact, but more reflect on what it brings, what added value it hopes to bring, and maybe to share with you some key challenges that we will see and that we hope will be addressed by the important work that PROTECT will do. I think it's also very useful to be having this kick-off conference at a time when the international framework for refugee protection and indeed all of the international agreements around refugee protection are under some strain at the moment, both in the context of Europe and beyond. And indeed we've seen in recent days and weeks developments at the EU's external borders, and in connection with what's happening in Syria. We have seen a number of political reactions to these developments that are quite challenging for the international refugee law framework. So this really is a vital time for academic work and for a project such as PROTECT to take a critical look at the Global Compact on Refugees and identify what is needed in order for the Compact to be successful. And my starting point really would be to say that the Global Compact reaffirms the international refugee law framework that's already there. The 1951 Convention is reaffirmed and the international legal framework is reaffirmed. And I think it's clear that for the Global Compact on Refugees to succeed, a prerequisite for that is that the international legal framework is respected and that the rule of law is maintained, both in Europe and beyond. And I hope that the work that PROTECT will do will look at that dynamic between what the Compact sets out and its ambitions and the importance of the legal framework being maintained. In terms of what has changed with the Global Compact on Refugees, I think that one key element is this idea of bringing more partners and more diverse partners into the effort to try and address better the problems that refugees, asylum seekers, IDPs and stateless persons find. That to a certain extent maybe there have been a limited number of actors heavily involved in this area of work, and we need new partners and new allies to assist us both in the work of protecting people when they flee, but also in the important work of developing integration, labour, employment, mobility, and these kinds of things. So I think it's important to see that the Compact envisages a partnership with the private sector, with employers, with a wider range of civil society organisations, and crucially with refugees, with people themselves who have fled and who have experience of displacement at the heart of designing those kinds of solutions. One key partner that we do have already fully on board in combined efforts in dealing better with displacement is the World Bank, for example. And in our relationship with the World Bank, there is an effort there to try and bring additional funding to countries that host displaced people. That's funding on top of normal development and humanitarian assistance, and also targeting that funding to really meet the needs of people who are displaced. It's these kinds of partnerships with new institutional actors that we think can be the key to unlocking additional solutions. So we had the Global Compact on Refugees reaffirmed or affirmed by the UN General Assembly in December 2018. The first big milestone after that was the Global Refugee Forum, which took place in Geneva in December and in which PROTECT was also present. This was a very, very big event. We had over 3,000 people attending. We had a very high-level delegation attending from the European Union, including at the level of commissioners and key staff from all of the Director Generals. We had heads of state from the main refugee hosting countries. We had a significant number of refugees themselves attending the event, and a wide range of partners from the private sector, financial institutions and beyond. So over 3,000 people attending, over 1,000 pledges made, pledges including not just money, but also pledges to support the building of asylum systems, pledges to resettle more people into countries. So a whole range of commitments that were made and have been documented, and there's information about those on our own website. At the close of the meeting, our High Commissioner for Refugees described the Global Refugee Forum as a success in the making. The success will lie in the implementation of the Global Compact on Refugees. So the forum was in a way our kick-off event to try and give some focus to the implementation that's needed. And now we need to follow up very closely on the next steps. In terms of the commitments that came on the European Union side, I think the Global Refugee Forum was not brilliantly timed for the new Commission, which had only been formed in the weeks prior to the Global Refugee Forum being held. But that notwithstanding, we did get a lot of support from the European Union and from the Commission, which has been very supportive of the Compact and the Global Refugee Forum since its inception. So you can see that there were pledges made in terms of best practices that the Commission wanted to highlight. There was a specific pledge in relation to resettlement, where the Commission announced that it would provide funding to support the resettlement into the European Union of 30,000 refugees in 2020. That's an increase on the around 25,000 refugees that have been received into the EU under EU-funded programmes in 2019 and 2018. So a concrete commitment there, but also commitments in other areas. In addition to those pledges at the GRF, there were also a number of initiatives that were announced. One are 3 support platforms that have been created to reinforce regional refugee responses. These include the MIRPS in Central America and Mexico. In Nairobi, we have a platform there, a process facilitated by IGAD or IGAD that supports the Eastern Horn of Africa. And then we also have a support platform for Afghan refugees called SSAR. Now, these platforms are government-led, which is one of the ways that we feel solutions can be better found if there's political support by governments to try and move ahead on solutions. These platforms will be supported by not just UNHCR, but UN agencies and more agencies also. And one of the things that we hope as well that the European Union and its member states can do is provide additional political support, including in relation to these 3 platforms that have been established. The second initiative, concrete initiative announced, was the 3-year strategy on resettlement and complementary pathways. This strategy has been developed by UNHCR and key allies through a consultation process that took place in the last 12 months. And we now have some concrete targets. Those targets include the resettlement of 1 million refugees and the arrival into safer places of 2 million people under complementary pathways. That's 3 million over the next 10 years. And we're actively involved in rolling out this 3-year strategy together with partners both in Europe and beyond. Thirdly, as also mentioned, and a group in which PROTECT is involved, is the Asylum Capacity Support Group. I think there's definitely, without a doubt, a feeling across all sectors that there needs to be much more engagement with academia when it comes to finding sustainable solutions for refugees, asylum seekers, stateless persons and IDPs. Too often we see policy in the domain of asylum and migration made either on the hoof or at a time of great political crisis. And we often find that the decisions that are taken are made without any impact analysis, any evidence base, any empirical research supporting the kind of policies that are put in place. There was quite a lot of reflective thinking in Brussels in late 2017, early 2018, on how things had rolled out in 2015 and 2016 in terms of the responses that were put in place. And one of the things that was continually raised was the lack of an evidence base and a consultation process around some of the measures that were put in place. The Asylum Capacity Support Group is one initiative perhaps where UNHCR and others can try and highlight the value that academia can bring to try and provide for a better, stronger, more robust policy framework when it comes to decision making and ideas in this domain. But I think this group is going to require a lot of support, some financing, and support within the academic community as well to work. In relation to the private sector, there were some pledges made at the Global Refugee Forum. Indeed, the private sector had pledged to provide $250 million in funding. But I think that the private sector contribution will be hopefully beyond pure financing, and also an engagement more in joint support and capacity and working together to try and find additional solutions. Maybe just one reflection as well on what we hope can happen in terms of added value when it comes to additional partnerships. I think one of the things that's clear is that we are clear on what the international refugee law framework is, and we are clear on what some of the main strategies are that we want to develop. But one area where I think things are less clear is how we can use the knowledge that we have on how to arrive at solutions, how we can use that to better frame the narrative that is dominating discussions on the media and in social media platforms when it comes to the issues of refugees, asylum seekers, stateless persons and IDPs. There we might need a little bit more assistance, let's say from gurus in the marketing area or communication specialists, to try and find out how we can better message around refugee issues. One of the messages that tends to come across very well all of the time is that people genuinely support refugees. They support people who are in need of protection, and they are willing to fully support providing assistance to those people as long as they feel there's some sense that governments are able to manage, that things are well managed, that rights and laws will be respected, and that the citizenry of Europe or whatever country it is that's hosting persons of concern can be managed. So I think we have to be a little bit more sophisticated about how we understand messages are received and what kind of media is the best kind to use to try and get across these types of narratives. I think anybody watching events in recent days and weeks in Europe will see how important messaging and framing of issues has been. And I think when it comes to those of us who really want to ensure the maintenance of the international refugee law regime and the maintenance of protections for some of the world's most vulnerable, we need to also be much, much better when it comes to narrative issues. So I hope that that's something that the PROTECT project, when it's looking at the implementation of the global compacts, both of them, and their impact, that there's also a look at the extent to which we're getting the messaging right, and we're really doing things in a way that is going to help the compacts to have a successful outcome. So I think I will leave it there, and happy to take any questions, and thank you all for your attention, and I wish all of those involved in the PROTECT project the best of luck, and we in UNHCR look forward to continuing to work with you and to support you in this valuable work that you're doing. Thank you.